I apologize for it being so late. I do have a full-time job, so keep that in mind. But I promised I'd do this, so here I am. So this user has a handful of questions for Christian apologetics, and while I'm not personally a Christian apologist, I feel that a lot of these topics are good points of discussion, and I got no suspicion that I'm incapable of navigating these issues. So, without further ado, let's help a man out. Question 1. Is it ethically justifiable for Christian apologists to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to Christ, even when they recognize the inaccuracies of certain assumptions? Okay, so I'm assuming you have eyes, you can see. There are multiple avenues to attack this question, no matter how you abstract it, that yield the same result. I will do my best to condense all these methods into one broad attack. In my practice online, given my interests in political philosophy and economics, I've provided myself a handful of rules that help me, let's say, navigate issues in a consistent manner while considering as many avenues as possible with a given prompt. One of these rules is called the rule of the layman. The rule states, in any situation in which you start your navigation as a mere layman, start with what you know and why you know it before you ever branch off from those. This is autistic monkey for don't pull things out of your rear end. For this approach to work, I'm going to have to modify your question until I can answer with something that's more knowledgeable to be true, or that I can answer more comfortably. Then we'll start to add details back until I can find something that doesn't stick. The following is the process for the abstractions that I took. Fair warning, they are a bit extreme. So we're going to start with the beginning question, which is it ethically justifiable for Christian apologists to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to Christ? Okay, we move from that then to, is it justifiable for anyone to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to Christ? I think that's fair enough. Abstracting it even further, is it justifiable for anyone to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to the truth? This is very important for people who are inclined to the Christian worldview. And then lastly, is it justifiable for anyone to lie when attempting to bring someone to the truth? We're going to get to that in a minute. This abstraction may seem a little unfair, but I will politely ask you to work with me here, as I feel, I'll put this, I promise the risks being assessed here tie back to the original question. In the book you see here in the background, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson, we get a glimpse of the risks associated with the promotion of anything other than the truth. In Rule 8, specifically page 209 of my copy, he describes a type of speech that is often overlooked because it can start, quote, manipulate the world into delivering what you want. It is the specialty of unscrupulous marketers, salesmen, pickup artists, and psychopaths. It is a type of speech people engage in when they attempt to influence and manipulate others. Obviously, this game, if we want to call it, is very risky for anyone to play, as their reputation is on the line. However, this isn't the only problem with this game if you choose to do anything other than ensure every one of your words is as accurate as possible in the moment. To lie, manipulate, or deceive in this game is to hold two things to be true that have sinister backgrounds for the Christian worldview. Now, you must simultaneously believe that A, you know everything that is sufficient to play the role of God and dictate what is good now and into the future, while also believing that B, reality would slip into unbearable suffering without your direct intervention. This understanding is my personal spin on what is described throughout the chapter of the book I cited, specifically Rule 8. If we take a look at that first axiom, required to do anything except tell the truth, it is already a direct sin against God himself. This is what makes lying incompatible with the Christian worldview and prohibited in most instances as early on as the Ten Commandments, even earlier if you attempt to extrapolate any sense of moral from the stories of Abraham and his son Isaac. The second axiom, in my opinion, downright requires a lack of faith in Jesus Christ altogether. To believe that life would suffer without your direct intervention is to believe Jesus Christ, who ascended into the heavens to take his throne at the right hand of God, abandoned his post. Both axioms pose major problems for the Christian worldview. Now, let's move up a level and see if there's anything more to commentate on. Is it justifiable for anyone to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to the truth? Given manipulations and logical fallacies are, to some stretch, lies, or at least factually wrong, I'm going to say no for the previously navigated reasons. Moving up again. Is it justifiable for anyone to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to Christ? Essentially, all that has changed is that we are now asking whether we can make an exception regarding telling the truth as important insofar as it brings people closer to Christ. The answer is no, because Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. This is John 14:6. If you need to say anything but the truth, you are not bringing people to Christ. Moving up again, is it ethically justifiable for Christian apologists to employ manipulation or logical fallacies when attempting to bring someone to Christ, even when they recognize the inaccuracies of certain assumptions? 1 Peter 5:5-6 says that God opposes the proud. So I dare anyone who takes the Bible seriously to explain to me why Christian apologists should not be humbled to a position to that of all other people. I am yet to see an argument sufficient to convince me that apologists get special permission in God's eyes. Also, I'll refer back to the idea that one must tell the truth to really, genuinely lead people to Christ. Whether this is an argument over ethics isn't really of my concern. Given everything that I've brought up thus far, I have reason to believe that this is just wrong and un-Christ-like, at least in one category. The nerdier nerds can nerd on in the comments from here as far as I'm concerned. Question 2. Are you familiar with ancient narrative fictions, including epics, poems, sagas, or myths predating the Bible which incorporate real geographical locations and place names into the narratives? Well, in the familiar words of a family friend, I am familiar of, not with, and definitely ain't intimate. I've read parts of, for example, the Norse sagas, but not to completion. I'm aware that there are Greek stories that predate parts of the Bible too. However, there are reasons outside of the Bible to believe in the fundamentals of the Christian worldview. Therefore, I don't really understand the relevance of these other stories. The Teleological Argument, historical arguments for the death and resurrection of Jesus, and the Leibnizian Cosmological Argument are just a few examples. Links to videos by Michael Jones going over these arguments will be provided in the description of this video. The Bible can really play more of a supplementary role in the greater discussion of theism versus atheism. Question 3. Do you prioritize defending the beliefs of your religious group over expressing your personal theological perspectives as an individual? On this channel, my opinions belong to me, myself, and I, unless specifically credited otherwise. If there are other theological positions that I don't hold, I would prioritize accuracy in the message of that theological position over my current understanding. Therefore, referring an opponent to someone else who I know specializes in that specific theological field, I have no issue saying, I don't know enough about that, but I know a guy who does. For the Christian, honesty in these types of discussions should be a top priority. We should all strive to be humble enough to let the truth unfold Given that I'm not primarily an apologist, this means that a lot of my opinions often take a backseat, and there isn't a thing wrong with that. I only know what I know in the way that I know it. Question 4. How does the historical basis of events and locations in the Iliad impact the theological claims within the text? Would the accuracy of character names in the narrative enhance or diminish the credibility of its supernatural assertions? I'm not going to lie, I don't have a straightforward answer for this. Mostly because this is a strange question to ask. Because history, as currently understood, isn't conducted in this manner. When you orchestrate a historical theory, your aim is to explain as much of the available data in a manner that makes the least number of assumptions. Because notable events in history aren't repeatable, historical explanations mostly need to consider elements like the chain of rule of events, for example. It is because of how history is conducted that we can separate discussions of history from discussions regarding theology, where it need not apply. Taking the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, for example, history merely denotes that Christianity was first preached in Jerusalem very early after Jesus' death, while theologians will then take the mantle and make the case that this is evidence Jesus was resurrected. In fact, an example of this is made in this video by Inspiring Philosophy, titled The Resurrection of Jesus, the Historical Evidence. This subdivision and specialization are important. Specialization provides us with better, more accurate, and more valuable information over time. As Associate Professor at Oklahoma State University Per L. Byland explains in this book, How to Think About the Economy, specializing makes us many times more effective and productive because we, 1, do not lose time shifting one task to another, and 2, develop and increase dexterity and workmanship. We would be incredibly wise to constantly remind ourselves of the respect we ought to give to the clear lines between the discussions of history and theology. Books like the Iliad or the Holy Bible can be examined both by their historical and theological basis to see if their claims stand on legs. Of course, I think the Bible stands on both very well, but those arguments are outside the scope of your question. Question 5. What explains the relative obscurity or infamy of figures such as Origen, Kierkegaard, Meister Eckhart, and not receiving the credit for defining theological concepts compared to later theologians who primarily assigned names to these concepts that do get credit? Should these gray figures be categorized alongside arch heretics like Arius or Marcion? Or should they be included with names such as John Chrysostom, Thomas Aquinas, and C.S. Lewis? Do you perceive historical treatment and resignment of men such as Origen and Eckhart to be justified or unjustified? So this is officially outside any of my realm of expertise. As I mentioned, I'm not primarily an apologist, so my specialty is not in church history or the changes in theological views over time. I would direct you to the work of Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Winger, and David of Apologetics Roadshow. Now, I hope my video finds you in good health. If you have any further questions, I will try to answer when and where I can. Until then, please, stay safe.